Thanks for joining us for the second Reborn in Wonder lecture. And I will ask the Newman Center chaplain, Father Mattia, to begin with a prayer. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. God our Father, we thank you for all the ways you bless us in our lives. Thank you for the blessing of the Newman Institute and its work and its impact that it's had in the lives of the students here at the University of Nebraska. We're grateful tonight that Dr. Nicolosi has traveled to be with us. We ask your blessing upon her and her important work. And I pray that tonight, through listening to her speak, that it will move us as Catholics to be engaged in the arts in a deeper way in our lives, and realize that this is an important place for us to be in our world, in our culture. We ask this blessing by praying together in the words your Son Jesus taught us. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen.
Amen.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you, Father Mattia, and again, welcome to this second lecture, Reborn in Wonder lecture for the series. Here we are at an institution that bears the name of John Henry Newman, so we're greatly proud this week after the canonization of our newest saint. And along with Bishop Connolly, who's here tonight, and 10 of our Newman Institute students, some of whom are here, we were privileged to be in Rome this past week to celebrate Newman's canonization. Newman was a great preacher of the truth, and a great lover of souls. And he would be pleased, I think, indeed, pleased by our attempts to bring to our students the fullness of truth for which he lived and died. By the way, in Rome we enjoyed a full range of experience, from the joyful solemnity of the canonization Mass held in St. Peter's Square, to a moving encounter with Cardinal Sarah, 40-minute audience with him. And on our last evening, Sunday, we even gate crashed a black tie event hosted by the British Embassy at the Collegio Urbana, and the entire English hierarchy of the Catholic Church was there, and oratorians, and there we were in our red Husker Catholic T-shirts, looking very much out of place. But nonetheless, one of our students, I don't know if Katie's here tonight, but Katie Thompson made a beeline for the Prince of Wales, and curtsied politely, and evoked the response from him after seeing the shirt. What is a Huska? So we will send him as a souvenir one of our Husker Catholic shirts. Wonderful. But Newman tonight must have been smiling at that event. And tonight I think we honor him as our attention turns to the question of how truth is communicated. Things have changed greatly in the time since his death, 1890. We have moved from what might be called the age of the written word to the age of the moving image. And sadly, as we know, fewer and fewer people read, but even greater numbers are influenced by the images they see on television and in film. And cinema is so much a part of our contemporary culture. It is a medium that may be used, like all media, for both good and ill. Hitler's National Socialists in the 1930s made good use of it for propaganda, to proclaim the superiority of the Aryan race. And in our own time, we see the effect, the influence of the dark and depraved realm of pornography, how images are embedded in people's minds. In dealing with young people for the last 20 years, I can't tell you how often I have heard from them the following: I wish I had not seen that image. It troubles my sleep and my waking hours. And that, I think, is one of the powers and the influences of the moving image. We live at a time when the profession of filmmaking is largely in the hands of those who are unfriendly to faith. Hollywood directors, screenwriters, and actors have the reputation of being atheists or agnostics. And this is a view, or theirs is a view of reality that does not include God. The only unseen realities acknowledged are those from the nightmarish world of the occult. How then can we expect them to present us a cinema which enlightens and inspires? How can its view of the world be anything other than a wasteland view? But there does exist in Hollywood a kind of fifth column, an underground, as it were, a resistance movement. And this movement seems to be growing. Witness the gradual uptick in recent years of such films as Mel Gibson's Passion of the Christ, or more recently, Unplanned. Our guest tonight has been at the heart of this movement. Dr. Barbara Nicolosi is founder of Act One, a nonprofit program set up to mentor believers for Hollywood careers as writers and executives. She holds a doctorate in creative writing from Bath University in the United Kingdom and a master's in film and television from Northwestern University. As an undergraduate, she studied the great books at Magdalen College in New Hampshire. Dr. Nicolosi has been a Hollywood script analyst and consultant on scores of projects ranging from The Passion of the Christ and Joan of Arcadia to Saving Grace and the animated video series The Antenna Tales. Her popular blog, Church of the Masses, has had more than 1 million hits. She has been a cultural commentator for the networks, for NPR, and for the BBC. And her work has appeared in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and Premiere Magazine. Her most recent book, I think it's her most recent at least, is Notes to Screenwriters, which was published in 2015. She has produced 5 plays in Hollywood's Actors Co-op Theater, and she now directs the script and screenwriting programs at Regent University in Virginia Beach. Our topic tonight, Towards an Authentic Christian Cinema. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Barbara.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for coming out. So many people. Wow, I didn't expect such a good group. So there must be a pack following me, I'm sure, or something. But it's really beautiful for me to be with Catholics. I don't get that opportunity very often. Most often, the evangelicals are the ones calling me. Pretty much everything I've done in my professional career has been through the grace and vision of evangelicals. And now I'm at Regent University, the school that Pat Robertson built, where there are many Catholics there, but still, I tried to work at Catholic U, but they told me I was too Catholic for them. So here I am again, but anyway, it's just lovely to be with Catholics. You don't have to, I love my evangelical brethren, and they, as I said, they've empowered me to do many things. But it's always funny, when I was applying for the job to start Act One, was at Hollywood First Pres right there underneath the Hollywood sign, and the pastor kept saying to me, "So tell me about your faith." And so I was like, "Well, raised in a Catholic family, They're like, "Yes, but tell me about your faith." And I said, "Well, okay, well, I went to Catholic school and in college, and I went all the way. I was a nun for 9 years, whatever." He's like, "Yes, tell me about your faith." And finally I said, "Pastor, what do you need to hear?" And he said, "I need to hear that Jesus is your Lord and Savior." And he said, "I need to hear that you have accepted that." And I said, "Every morning at Mass." And he said, "Okay, we will hire you." So anyway, but they're lovely. Okay, so this is going to be like the weirdest talk you hear this week. I don't know how many of these things you go to, but this is kind of my dissertation, which is that Flannery O'Connor meets Sergei Eisenstein. Has anybody here heard of Sergei Eisenstein? Oh, wonderful, wonderful, that's good. So you just have to take my word that I'm getting him right then. Nobody knows. So, this was a stamp that I love. Flannery O'Connor was on the 3-ounce stamp in 2015. And there you go, this profoundly, profoundly, intentionally Catholic writer merits a 3-ounce stamp. So, rah, that's great. Okay, so we're talking about storytelling tonight, and visual storytelling is my thing, but storytelling in general is in trouble. It's in crisis. And in a lot of ways, I think it's a moment for us. I think it could be a moment for the church to remind the world and our culture what a real story is and why we need them. But I did my dissertation on, everybody knows Flannery O'Connor was great, and if you don't think that, get some therapy. But pretty much everybody knows she was great, but not everybody knows why she was great. And so I wanted to kind of drill down in that. So what I figured out is that she had this thing she called haunting moments, right? Moments as opposed to beats, and I'm going to explain what I mean by that. But so I'm going to throw a whole bunch of things out there, and we'll see what sticks. But she speaks a lot. Sorry, we're washing out our screen here with the light, but anyway, the slides are gorgeous. If you can see what I'm seeing here, oh well. But anyway, this question that she would say over and over, when I'm trying to get my stories to work, I need to do this. And she uses this all the time. And so I think that what you have here are different images of stories that are working, right? So these kids here, what they're seeing is working on them, right? In some sense, it's eliciting an emotional response. And because they're watching it together, it's creating community there between them. But, and here, same thing, an emotional response, and again, because they're doing it together, we shared that together. This is a whole other level of working as a story, right? And this is where we want to go. Now, I'm not saying that every story that we write or create should produce this effect, which is brooding. But at least some of them should. And my sense is that we're not, as a church, when we do offer things to the culture, that we're not getting that at all. If anything, people are, they'll be brooding over, do they know how lame they are? Right, so, okay, so now here's if I had to put my dissertation, or my understanding of what Flannery O'Connor is doing in a picture, this is the image that I've been using. And this is a juxtaposition in one frame, where there's two things that don't go together. But the photographer has put them together, right? He stumbled on them, whatever. But it's the kind of thing you have to, how did this happen? Right? What's going on here? What are these kids thinking? Where are their parents? What kind of a world is this? The idea of a juxtaposition, two things that don't go together. Art puts them together. And this compels people to have to then make sense of it. I think this is the core of what O'Connor is doing in her story. Well, my dissertation was juxtaposing these two. The Catholic, Southern, Gothic short story genius with the Marxist, Russian, propagandist, film theorist. And yet, what I found was, so Sir Eisenstein was the first great film theorist. He invented a term called montage, which means editing, in which he realized that the real power in cinema was putting two things together, frame by frame, or in a frame, two things, and making the audience go, what? Those two things don't go together. So an example of an easy one would be in Marxist cinema, they would show a trough of pigs eating at their trough, and then cut to a bunch of capitalists eating lunch. All right, and there's the juxtaposition. And so the audience merging those together says, oh, those capitalists are swine. Right? But if you tell the audience the capitalists are swine, it's not powerful. The power is the audience saying it to themselves, right? And this is the tricky thing that O'Connor allows for audience to have to work it out. And so you read her stories, and there's so many of them where you're like, I don't know what this means. And she's saying to you somewhere from beyond the grave in her throne up in heaven now, think about it!
Yeah.
My students come to me all the time, they're like, can you tell me what this story means? I was like, yes, but I won't. Because it's not going to be saving for you if I tell you, right? You have to work it. And so the idea is the story intriguing enough that you want to work it? And there's the art. But okay, so this is where we're kind of heading, that essentially both of these two people, even though they are completely different ideologically, they both understood the same thing about story, and the power of it was that ultimately it's not what you say to the audience, it's what you get the audience to say to itself, because you've jarred them. And a kind of a violent thing, huh? All right, here's a great quote, which I don't know if this is really relevant, but it's so beautiful that you have to listen to me. I'm giving the talk. So here we go. This is O'Connor, and she says, the problem of the novelist who wishes to write about a man's encounter with God is how he shall make the experience, which is both natural and supernatural, understandable and credible to his reader. In any age, it is a problem, but in our age, it is well nigh an insurmountable one. Today's audience is one in which religious feeling has become, if not atrophied, at least vaporous and sentimental. She said this in 1957. Can you imagine what she would say today about us, right? So, okay. Now, here's just a layout for you. So that's the challenge. That's what we're trying to do. We are trying to, in our stories, make the encounter with God, which is both rooted in stuff and invisible, somehow understandable and credible to people. Like, that's the challenge of story for us as Christians, okay? All right. Now, let me just throw out some the reality of where we are. And it's not just, yes, Christian movies are horribly embarrassing. But the good news is the world is just as bad right now at storytelling. So here's some quotes. In GQ, Mark Harris said, "It has never been harder for an intelligent, moderately budgeted original movie aimed at adults to get onto movie screens nationwide." In PwC, they did a survey in Los Angeles, and they said 41% of moviegoers noted they don't go to movies most often anymore because the movie genre and theme is uninteresting to them. If I threw that out to you and said, how many of you have gone to the movies or go to the movies regularly? Anybody? I mean, a couple, huh? But you'd realize in the post-war period, 80% of Americans went weekly. So you've seen this unbelievable drop-off in stories. And my students, I teach, I'm teaching undergraduates right now because clearly I have sins to atone for. But I had one say to me 2 weeks ago, because I said, you have great literature and then you have comic books. It's not like they're great literature. And all of a sudden I heard, and I turned around and said, yeah, I can't let that go by. And I said, you can't let what go by? And he said, comic books are great literature, you just don't know how to read them. And I said to him, no, they're not great literature. I I'm sorry. He said, how do you know? And I said, because I've read great literature. And I know the difference. He goes, oh, that's the argument from snobbery. And he said, just because you've read more books than I have, you think you know more than me? And I said, yes. Yes. And so I said to him, have you read Dostoevsky? No. I said, have you read Melville? No. I said, well, have you read Hawthorne? And he said, yeah, I read some Hawthorne. And I said, well, which one? He said, I don't remember, it didn't impress me. So, unfortunately, we have a problem. We have a cultural disconnect where he thinks that, my students think that Avengers Endgame is great literature. It's not. It's an extended roller coaster ride. Okay. So here's the last one, and this is, particularly for Hollywood people, this makes us groan. But this was Blake Snyder, who wrote a book called Save the Cat, which is the book that people have been using for like 10, 15 years in Hollywood. The last book on screenwriting you'll ever need. And he said, type up my beat sheet and carry it with you everywhere. Whenever you have an idle moment, think about your favorite movie. Can the beats of the movie fit into neat one-sentence descriptions of each of my 15 blanks? Right? So if you think movies feel formulaic to you now, it's because they are. Right? And that this is essentially ruined storytelling, such that people don't know how to do it anymore. And so we have a problem. But we can't, as bad as it is in the secular world, I'm sorry, but this is a smattering of projects that Christians have put out there. And here's the problem, okay, the disconnect. So I'm going to pick on Karen Kingsbury. I know Karen, we've been to conferences together, she's lovely, but she writes Christian fiction. Here are Christian reviews of Karen's work, right? I devoured When We Were Young in 24 hours. The book was simply wonderful, and I feel like I haven't adequately expressed how I feel. I can't encourage you enough to read this book. Do it now. It was heartbreaking, powerful, emotional, thought-provoking. Another Christian critic. In this moment, Karen Kingsbury gives us a story that is a definite masterpiece. Here's another critic, a Christian writer. I loved this book. It made me cry. It was sweet. It was powerful. It hung together. Karen has a gift from God to produce beautiful writing. Finally, Karen has done it again, kept me riveted by her books. I love the story. It contains so much of what we Christians are facing today, so powerful. Okay, here's secular reviews of Kingsbury's books. Right. From The Bridge. All in all, I do not recommend this book because it is extremely basic without any surprises and is a quick read because of its lack of depth. Here's another one from Publishers Weekly. The latest offering from Christian publishing phenom Kingsbury spills over with her trademark sentimentality and easy prose, but is marred by melodramatic implausibilities. The dialogue is not authentic. For example, in one scene, a teenage boy asks his mom to tell me your love story. Come on, I have 6 sons. That's not. And then finally, from Purpose Reviews, since Deus Ex Machina is Kingsbury's go-to plot device, nothing, particularly redemption, is left to chance, and then go on. So the criticism that the seculars are throwing at Christian story today isn't because it's full of faith. Like, we're not earning their derision because our work is formidable but faithful. We're earning their derision because it's bad. But we like it. That's the problem. We like it. The same reason we like it is why we have this kind of art in our churches today. And it's a longer talk and it's not what I'm talking about tonight, but find me on YouTube, and I wax a lot about why Catholic churches have gone from the Pietà to this. But it's part of what we're wrestling with, the white martyrdom of being a Christian right now and a Catholic in the church. Okay, all right, so O'Connor is looking to give you a shock in her stories. She wants to jolt you. And she said this, you know, we need to produce in our stories a shock for the reader. She thinks Christian stories should have a prophetic effect. So think about that. I mean, if you met a prophet, it's like, how was your day, dear? Oh, it was okay. I met a prophet. Well, what was he like? Well, you know, he was nice. Made me feel, you know, comfortable. I mean, that's my kind of prophet, but unfortunately, that's the bad kind of prophet. And too much of the work that I see Christians producing today is to achieve this effect of rah, rah, we're not that bad. We're okay. But when you read great Christian writers, Catholic writers, their stories are like devastating perp walks where we kill ourselves except Jesus loves us. You know, Brideshead Revisited, The Power and the Glory, you know, pretty much everything by O'Connor. But so she says this, she says, what you need to make a story work is a moment that is both totally believable and yet totally unexpected that would suggest the presence of mystery. It's a weird combination of that people have to go, yes, that happens, but I don't know why. And you have to come up and find that moment. And so here's the little, this is the loop that O'Connor is trying to elicit in her stories, and she wants us to do it too. You set up a universal sin-driven situation, something shocking happens, violent. And I don't necessarily mean physical violence, I mean something gut-wrenching in a person. The viewer, the reader doesn't get it. That's the key. You don't get why the character just did that, or said that, or why she's all of a sudden talking about, you know, the woods in the story. Like, you don't get it. It's violent. And so then you go back, and you play it over, and you play it over. The thing is that our stories, it's not telling people the truth. It's getting them to wrestle with the truth that is saving. Otherwise, you could just cut up the Bible and drop it over towns, right? It's like, oh, you know, for God so loved the world, look, whoa! It's not just saying the truth to people. It's how do you get them to... So this loop, which is essentially an act of faith by a storyteller because she knows you're not going to get it right away. And she's throwing it out on you. She's like, I'm a storyteller. I set up a puzzle. I throw it out to you. Now your job is to figure it out. I find most of the Christian investors that I talk to about art, to try to get money out of them to make things, they have no tolerance for this. They want it to be overt and clear. Everything on the nose. What's on the nose is an insult in Hollywood. But for Catholic people commissioning art, it's what they want. You know, we want it to be something that, you know, you can see it and you don't, you know, you understand it. You don't have to think, well, you know, that's what we're serving. But it's not what great art is. Okay, so I don't say anything about her moment thing here. I don't know if this is making any sense at all, but too bad. Okay, all right. So Blake Snyder, who I just maligned for his book Save the Cat, he does say though that ultimately all stories are about transformation. In every story, a caterpillar becomes a butterfly, if it's a real story. Now this goes back to Aristotle. Aristotle said stories we need so that people they brought to a catharsis of either compassion or the fear of evil. That's what stories, that's why we need them. And he says the problem is, why do you need the compassion thing? Because you read a story and you at the end of it you should go, wow, there but for the grace of God go I. Those two idiots, Romeo and Juliet, I could be them. So I don't call them idiots, because I'm like, wow, I get being in love and making you crazy to do stupid things. That could be me. Right? That catharsis, and you know, the word catharsis means, and then be open to a better idea. That's another violent act. And then the fear of evil. Then he said the cathartic fear of evil would be, well, your people are going to screw up. We're going to screw up, but we want to say, wow, I don't want to be Othello. So I'm not going to dabble in jealousy. But the idea is, if people do dabble in jealousy, because I've had good stories, I'm not going to cut their head off, because I've had compassion. But at the same time, I'm going to avoid evil. That this moment that O'Connor is kind of pushing towards is this moment of transformation. Yeah, okay. So I think that one of the things that's missing in movies today, especially the ones we throw at young people, the comic book stuff, as Spielberg said, the problem with movies today is they're all beginnings, but they're not real stories. Well, what is that? Well, they're meant to be franchises. So you can't ever have a transformation, can you? If Iron Man ever figures out that he's an arrogant jackass, the franchise is over. So we have to hold him in this place of perpetual obnoxiousness. Film after film after film. Right? And you see, so this idea that we don't, that one of the things of the blockbuster era is this, everything is these, like, how can we make another $1 billion on the next movie? And so they're essentially all beginnings. It's just kind of a brilliant observation, but what does Spielberg know? All right, so moment. You know, what is a moment? This is the definition of moment from the dictionary, which I love. It's such a rich word. So for O'Connor, she's like, I need that moment in a story, right? So what specifically am I pulling out of this definition? You know, a definite period or stage in the course of events, a period of importance or consequence, a defining event, a cause of change. That's what a real moment is, huh? Just a couple more smart people. You know, Aristotle called this moment in story, the cathartic moment of either fear of evil or compassion, anagnoresis, which is a knowing to the core. The idea that a story would move you into a knowing to the core. You may not be able to say it, but you now know something because you've traveled the journey of the story. I remember my brother-in-law when they went to see Finding Nemo, so we're going back a few years, I think it was like 99, that movie came out, Pixar. But he was like, did 3 tours in Iraq, he was a very physical guy, and he wasn't a philosopher. And my sister wanted him to think more about what kind of a dad he was. So they went to Finding Nemo, and they were coming out of the movie, and the little boy is asleep in the back of the truck, and my brother-in-law says to my sister, babe, am I a good dad? So this, watching neurotic little marlin fish try to figure out how to parent. How do I hold on tight but not too tight? For my brother-in-law got him to the, am I a good dad? I mean, that is a knowing to the core moment that only, story, not only, but that's where story really excels, if we're doing it right. People ask me all the time, what are the best movies made by Christians right now? And the answer is nothing. The best Christian movies being made now are not being made by Christians. I gave you a list here of movies I recommend. And I don't even know if any of these were made by people who profess faith. But like the best movie right now that I've seen lately is called, Peanut Butter Falcon. It was a festival picture, stars Shia LaBeouf and Dakota Johnson from 50 Shades of Grey. It's beautiful, powerful. movie about a guy with Down syndrome and his coming-of-age movie. Powerful, beautiful film. I wish we could claim that Christians make it, but we can't. When I have Catholics come to me and pitch me movie ideas, it's always with a saint in it. You know? And I love the saints. But you're not going to watch the St. Teresa movie unless you're in the game. And so, there it is. Okay. Yeah. Wordsworth said a story should be built around a sounding cataract. I love this. So, a sounding cataract, what does that mean? A sounding is something ships do, where they drop weights to figure out how deep the water is. A cataract is a storm. So what Wordsworth is saying is art should provoke a storm in us that shows us how deep we are, or shallow. And we have to be able to tolerate that. A prophetic voice in art. You know, John Paul II said, the church has need of the prophetic voice of the arts. Prophetic. It better shake you up. Now, I don't mean violate. But it should, I mean, every so often, we should not just be producing things that are a nice warm glass of milk to make us feel better about the fact that, you know, the world we live in isn't as bad as it looks. Well, I don't know about you, but I live in California. You know, they're getting ready to euthanize everybody in the nursing homes there. A warm glass of milk ain't gonna get it done. But can we tolerate the disruption? You know, and that's what O'Connor does. She makes you disturbed, but rightly so. We need to be disturbed out of our complacency. But I just want to be so clear. I don't mean violated. And the fact that the Catholics today don't know the difference is a huge problem. You know, we're so used to the banal in art. Music in the church is just so bad. You know, it kind of like washes over you like you're in an elevator, the elevator to hell. You know, so much of it, it doesn't elicit anything. It's just filler. Okay, all right. I'm gonna read a couple quotes of hers, and I'm just like throwing this out. The reason what I'm doing here for you is when you pick her up, which is my goal tonight, for you to really try to give Flannery O'Connor a chance and work her. And if you hate her at first, I did too when I was ignorant. But watch for this in her story. She says, I often ask myself what makes a story work and what makes it hold up as a story. And I have decided that it is probably some action, some gesture of a character that is unlike any other in the story, one which indicates where the real heart of the story lies. And she goes on. There would have to be an action or a gesture which is both totally right and totally unexpected. It would have to be one that is both in character and beyond character, suggesting the world and eternity. The gesture would transcend any neat allegory or pat moral categories the reader could make. It would be a gesture that somehow made contact with mystery. What does that mean? It means for O'Connor, she wants a moment that you know, you're looking at someone and they do something because of their sin, usually. That just goes, it reveals that human beings are more than machines. And so she calls this the haunting moment, right? It takes us through a character's moment of grace, arriving through some kind of darkness. The effect is heightened if the darkness is coming from a character's personal sin. She's very interesting here. She's like, I think that sin can lead us closer to God sometimes because it breaks us. Sin can break us. It can humiliate us. And she said that, and I love this because people are like, no, I don't want that. I don't want good to come from sin. And Flannery O'Connor said, well, that's all God has to work with most of us. If he waited for our angelic moments to work with us, he'd be waiting an awful long time, right? The truth is, it's in our brokenness and our sin that hopefully we question ourselves, if it's really tearing us apart. And so in stories, she wants to look at those moments when, because of our pride, our misconceptions, our ego, all this stuff, we do something that then exposes us as being fundamentally broken, a mess, in need of a savior. I want to make the point that these moments that O'Connor is pushing towards in her stories, are not emotionally charged moments. See, this is where Christian stuff lives. This is why they're called melodramatic. They're sentimental. O'Connor said sentimentality is inexcusable in Christians because it is an overemphasis on innocence. And we know what's in the heart of men. But emotionally charged moments, the problem with them in story, and then I say Christian work is full of this kind of thing. Oh, the cute little kitten, oh, the couple in love, oh, poor child, sick, oh, mother, dead child, that there's nowhere to go with these for the viewer or the reader. You get a pulse from them in a story. You put a sick child or a cute kitten. But then you don't have to think about it. Right? Because it's not a juxtaposition that you have to reconcile. I mean, how many of you are going to go home tonight? That cute kitten, what does it mean? It was soft and furry. I mean, it's just like it's a cute kitten. It makes you go, ah, right? And it's over. So, juxtaposition is, I'm just going to say a couple more words and then I'll throw it out there and we can take questions. This has been very bizarre, I know. But, so the juxtaposition, she says the writer is looking for one image that will connect or embody 2 points. One is a point in the concrete, the human, the real. The other is a point not visible to the naked eye, but believed by him firmly, just as real to him really as one that everybody sees. I'm going to move here. This is an example of a juxtaposition in film. Lawrence of Arabia. It's intentionally the white Englishman, the black swarthy Arab. Like, that's the movie. This juxtaposition. Can these 2 things be reconciled? How? How could we get along with each other when we're so different? What will it take? And it's thrown out to you in the movie. How can we ever get together? So this idea of 2 things that don't go together, sorry, you can't see them. This is that great image by Spielberg, the objects in the mirror are closer than they appear. Right? No birds on the sign. But anyway, let me just say this: that juxtaposition in art deliberately creates conflict in the viewer, and a sense of you're jarred deliberately. So this idea, how do I make sense of these 2 things, right? And then it's thrown on you, okay? All right, sorry, this is what O'Connor wants. Yeah, let me just get to the end here because we're, So, the juxtaposition that O'Connor is pushing towards in her stories is paradox. This is the word we're looking for, paradox. To think more in the Greek. Paradox. But not any kind. She thinks that Christian stories should be always dealing with this, the awful juxtaposition of sin and growth. We hate this. I just got over breast cancer. I mean, I'm going through my first year. I got 4 more years before we have only a 20% chance of dying of it. I don't want to hear that that was grace. I don't want to hear that I'm supposed to grow from that. You know? I'm watching a friend of mine struggle right now with drug addiction. You know, it's like you don't want to think, could God work through that? We want God to work through a nice breeze wafting over a light green meadow with flowers. We don't want to, like, how is this awful thing, my own sin, something that could lead me to believe there is a God and to embrace grace? How could I, right? So, yeah, and she says this. She says, I've found for me that in stories, you need an action which indicates that the devil has been the unwilling instrument of grace. Because God is sovereign. Every screw-up that we do can end up being better than the plan A. Plan A is God's plan. Plan B is us with God messing up his plan, and then he makes it better. Oh, happy fault. So O'Connor thinks that's where we need to be writing. But that requires the cross, doesn't it? It requires showing the sin, the violence of sin. I don't have, yeah. So Eisenstein has the same conclusion. Anyway, sorry, here we go. I'm going to say, yeah, that all of these somehow, we have to say, thank God. Right? Thank God this Agha guy shot John Paul II. Thank God. Because he never would have had this moment. You know, thank God all of these terrible things happened. Because that's when grace cracked into me. And so, stories, you know, was it a good thing that Ulysses, you know, yelled his name to the Cyclops, which causes him to get lost for 20 years? Homer says yes. Thank God he was an arrogant idiot. Because otherwise he just would have been a normal guy, but he becomes wise by what he suffers. Huh? You know, was Verona better off after Romeo and Juliet died? Yes. Yes. They learned a big lesson about hate. All right, so what I want to say then is we have to be willing to see the dark side in our art. As Flannery O'Connor says, the resurrection is pointless if there isn't a reason for it in the lives that we live. So what I see in so much Christian work is just, it's soft. It's not the cross that we're depicting when we tell stories to the world as believers. We're talking with them about a rainy Tuesday afternoon. You know, I think, well, I don't want anything too depressing. Like, excuse me, are you not living in the 21st century? Now, I'm not saying that every story has to make you want to kill yourself. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying every so often we should give the world something meaty that exposes it as not having all the answers, as being broken, but that there is the possibility of grace. And it seems to me that would be where our stories would differ, that grace is our terrain. And she said this. She said, my only agenda as a storyteller is to convict people that grace is out there. It's just as present as sin in the world. So I think, my assessment, I'll throw it out there now. Sorry, all this is great stuff. We just don't have time. But let me just get here to the end. Yeah, cool, great stuff, yeah. All right, so my last idea is that fundamentally, in our stories, it's not what we say, it's the subtext. So the moments that we put in our stories that are these juxtapositions that people have to reconcile, the reconciliation should come down to one of our defining subtexts. Something only we can say, or that only we say in a particular way. Because if we're not doing it, then nobody's doing it. If we're not saying these things, right? So, for example, a defining subtext is that everything we see is a sign of something we cannot see. It's the sacramental vision. That should be imbued in the story. You never say it. The audience has to get there by breaking open the moment that you've put in there. Another one is good and evil are not equal. This is bad theology in this art. Jesus is not wrestling the devil. That's St. Michael. You know, good and evil are not equal. That should be in there. People should sense it. Suffering and joy are inextricably bound. Death is not the worst thing that can happen to you. Redemption is found in cleaving to beauty, truth, and goodness. The second person of the Trinity. Any being that can behold God is sacred. Even it has the potential to behold God. Huh? The grace is always out there. And finally, thank you, Hunger Games, the greatest thing you can do is die for your friend. So what I'm saying is that these subtexts, when somebody watches one of our movies or reads one of our stories, they should come away with the knowing to the core of one of these things that define us. But my sense of most of the work that we're putting out there is that they don't. They don't have any subtext at all. And the reason we don't have subtext in our stories is we don't trust the audience is going to work it and find it. So everything is a sermon where we tell them, and so they dismiss it. So I'm hoping that we've all agreed that the last 40 years where the church has not really had any voice in the culture has been a bad idea. So what do? We got to start praying for geniuses. You got to start praying for Mozarts in the culture. And God will hear the cries of his people. And then number 2, you got to start making the sacrifices to train artists, to train storytellers. Get your little kids' butts on the seats of the piano benches. Make them read great literature. And no, I don't mean comic books. That this will then help begin to create a framework so that the next 40 years, maybe the church will have something to say in the culture. And not just to ourselves, but to everybody else. Thank you.
Sentimentality and mystery. I find there's a lot of crossover in, I'm a musician, I'm a composer. There's a lot of crossover. I think we've lost a lot of our feelings to be uncomfortable with music, for foreignness and have, say, mysterious things. But I guess I have so many points that I wanted to address with you, but
I know,
one thing at the end, this thing you said, and I think this will take precedent over all the others, is that you said that the church is not engaging the culture. And in my experience as a musician who did not really grow up as a Christian musician, I played in rock bands and anything before I went over to the other side. The idea is that that the church was engaging the culture very much so. and engaging the worst part of it.
Oh,
This sentimental part,
Yeah.
and hence you have Christian rock.
yeah.
And so, and I knew all the time when I was playing rock music, this is not the music. So my question is, isn't it, it seems rather that we don't need geniuses, we have geniuses, but it's the geniuses that are presenting themselves and the church is saying, not that good. We don't
Could
want
be.
that good.
Yeah, I mean, the people of God have just abominable taste in the arts right now.
Yes.
And that's because we've been worn down. My sense of most Catholics that I meet is when it comes to art, we only know what we like, we don't know what we're talking about. And so, and this is particularly egregious when it comes to the priests, who are the gatekeepers in the parishes. You know, I had a priest, one day I stumbled out of Mass in LA, and I said to Father, the Monsignor at the door, I said, Monsignor, what did we do to deserve music this bad? And he said, Barbara, you can go to the 10 o'clock Mass, they have the word this sign, and they have that. I said, no. You can have good music, well done. You can have good music, badly done. You can have bad music, well done. And you can have bad music, badly done. And that's what we have. And he said to me, Barbara, when we give God our little offerings, it's like a 4-year-old who brings his mother a picture. And the mother doesn't say, oh, this is ugly. She puts it on the refrigerator. I said, Monsignor, if I brought my mother a picture that looked like it had been drawn by a 4-year-old, she would say to me, what is this? Right? But you see there, in his mind, it doesn't matter that much. It doesn't matter that much. And I've had several encounters with clergy, and they're the gatekeepers. This is one of the problems, huh? Sorry, Your Excellency, bishop, but I'm sorry, and I don't get a bishop to listen to me very often, and this is why. But anyway, I think aesthetics in the seminary again. Aesthetics. What is the beautiful? Why do we need it? What does it add to the Eucharistic celebration? That it should be accompanied by the beautiful. Pope Benedict said, when you look at the music in the church today, you can only conclude that the church is afflicted with the cult of the banal. This is serious problem. Because another thing Pope Benedict said is, they're the two most powerful reasons that convict modern man that the message of the church is true are the lives of her saints and the beauty of the works that she produces. This is not something dismissible. Oh, Barbara, get over yourself. It matters. And I'm really hoping we're done with the ugliness, the banality, the embarrassment. I mean, one of the hardest things I do in Hollywood is bring converts to church for the first time. I've had 58 people who worked in Hollywood come into the Catholic Church. But I remember one of them, she's a showrunner, do you mind me telling this story? She creates television shows, and she has a show on the air now called Madam Secretary. Her name is Barbara Hall. Okay. So she came into the church, she tutored her, it was beautiful. But then when she came into the church on Pentecost, she had the whole writing staff of Judging Amy there sitting behind her. She was their boss. And they're all pagans, And all of a sudden a horn blared out, and we turned around, and 6 overweight women in leotards were leaping up the aisle, throwing rose petals. And Barbara leaned over and said to me, "Is this the final test?" And I said, "Oh no, you will be offended aesthetically, routinely. It's the white martyrdom." Okay, good, yeah, so, yes. Yes.
So, 2 questions. First of all, do you think that that student that you encountered earlier that you told us about,
Yeah.
do you think that was the first time he'd ever been called ignorant? And then the other question is did Shakespeare face some of the same challenges in his time of storytelling that Flannery O'Connor or others faced?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know enough about Shakespeare. Somebody else could probably answer that question, but my instinct is that every genius encounters opposition because they're changing a paradigm somehow. So O'Connor, she faced tremendous opposition from Catholics. Even today, she's banned in many Catholic high schools.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. But in her own time, her greatest opposition came from Catholics, her own family. Her mother was horribly ashamed of her daughter's work. In fact, when I went to Milledgeville last year, I met a woman in the cemetery, and she kind of sized me up, and she said, "Oh, you're here to find Flannery O'Connor's grave?" And I said, "Yeah, can you take me there?" She goes, "Sure." So she's walking me over, and she says, "Between you and me, I think her stuff is scandalous." But she still, gave tours at the cemetery. But anyway, all right. So that's the first question. What was the second?
So the first question was, do you think that student...
Oh, right, it was the first time they called him ignorant. I didn't call him ignorant to his face.
No, but
But yeah, I mean, he didn't care. That's the problem. In the end, he dismissed what I said as, "That's your opinion." And he kept kind of quoting a line from Avengers Endgame, like it was gonna, it was gonna get me, and I was just like, okay, that's so not the Brothers Karamazov. But he doesn't know, and he doesn't care. Plato described this terrible, terrible obstacle to education thousands of years ago, which is called double ignorance. That people don't know, and they don't know that they don't know. And that you have to, at least for education, you have to move them out of the "they don't know that they don't know," at least into the "I don't know." But I find with my students, very often, my opinion is just another voice out there. It has absolutely no validity. It's like, say, you think that because you've read more books, that you know more than I do. And it's just like, yeah, isn't that the point of it? Isn't that why you're in university and I'm up here? Anyway, one of my students, when I was trying to give feedback on her project 2 weeks ago, they made little short films for me, and I was giving her feedback, and she said, "No, stop. I think it's perfect." And it was bad. But I said to her, "I gave notes to Mel freaking Gibson." He didn't think it was perfect. And so there you go. There's a weird thing going on where our tastes for us equal intelligence, and it's not.
Do you know why? Is that tied to...
I think it's a whole bunch of things. I think postmodernism has told us that there is no truth, there is no good, there is no beautiful, there's only my understanding of it, my appreciation of it. So that's why, when I say to Father, the music is awful, he's like, "Well, if you don't like it, that's your taste." And it's like, no, music is awful. It's awful. I have good taste.
So, for the person with bad taste that likes Avengers or things like that, is it just a given that really good art will strike that person and then they'll ponder things?
Yeah.
Or what if they just say, "Well, that's hard and Avengers is easy and awesome, so I'm just gonna go with that"?
Yeah.
And,
I'm not opposed to roller coaster rides.
Yeah. But is there a tilling of the soil for that person that needs to happen so they can receive that
Yeah,
art?
it's a great question, isn't it? How do you get someone who's been acclimated to having all of the hard answers given to them, or told that they don't really matter, how do you get them to try to wrestle, right? And O'Connor's answer was, you make the story rich enough and cool enough and interesting enough that they get hooked in it, and she says, and then they have to look at the one thing they don't want to look at, which is themselves. But I do think, and I do want to be clear, I mean, do I think Avengers Endgame are pernicious? No, I think they are what they are. But my problem is, and I say this to my students all the time, if you are all watching comic books, who's reading Crime and Punishment? Because you need some depth in your stories. Aristotle believed that the health of a society, our ability to live together and thrive, comes down to the stories that we share. So this is serious stuff. But we've just had so much of it. You know, since Spielberg's Latex Shark, age 6 tourists, you know,